listening.
Hopefully the power stays on.
Yeah, no kidding.
Has it been bad over there?
No, just raining. 3, 2, 1. Good evening and welcome to Thursdays with NAMI. My name is Peg Morrison and I'll be your host for the evening. I'm the Director of Programs for NAMI North Carolina. That's the National Alliance on Mental Illness of North Carolina. Thursdays with NAMI is our effort to build conversations and build community around the topic of mental health. I'm glad you're here. September is Suicide Awareness Prevention Month, and tonight we'll be focusing on veteran suicide. According to the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs, there are about 20 suicides by vets every day. What a heartbreaking statistic. Our guests tonight, Glenn Proctor and Jeff Smith, will share their insights and what's being done in North Carolina to reverse the trend. First, a word from our sponsors. Thursdays with NAMI is funded in part by the North Carolina Department of Health and Human Services, Division of Mental Health, Developmental Disabilities, and Substance Abuse Services through the Federal Community Mental Health Services Block Grant Fund. We truly appreciate their guidance and support. As usual, the first part of our show will be a conversation with our guests, an interview. Then we'll follow up with our video of the week. And finally, we'll have questions from you, our virtual studio audience. Moving right along, Thursdays with NAMI is recorded. If you have a friend who could not be with us tonight, please forgive them. We believe in second chances here at NAMI. Tonight's episode will be available on our YouTube channel within a week or so. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our guests. Both of them have a long list of qualifications to address this topic, veteran suicide. I'll just read a few highlights before we begin. Glenn Proctor was a Marine who lost several brothers in arms to suicide. He also personally heard the gunshot as his grandfather took his own life. He's written extensively about suicide as a journalist and author. He has a long list of training credentials on the topic of suicide, grieving, coping. Glenn approaches his work with the lived experience of an alcoholic, a foster kid, a single parent, and cancer survivor. This is a gentleman who's been there. He's a Charlotte resident. Jeff Smith is a former Marine reservist. He's the current Military and Veterans Program Liaison for the DHHS. In 2009, he co-founded a statewide nonprofit Veterans Leadership Council, which created the Veterans Life Center in Butner. Slated to open in July, the center will serve homeless and at-risk veterans and return them to self-reliance. What an important mission. Jeff lives in Raleigh. All right, so I want to start out by asking both of you a question. And first, I'll thank you for your service. And okay, sorry about that, distracted by a background noise. I want to thank you for serving our country and especially for serving other veterans. What pointed you in that direction to focus on the difficult subject of veteran suicide? And either one of you can go first.
Jeff, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much for the invitation to be here, and it's an honor to be included on the same conversation with Glenn on this very serious subject. All of the Marines I know take this subject very seriously. I was brought to this work, I would have to say, by accident, but with no regrets. I met some vets that had recently come back from Iraq and Afghanistan in 2008 and 2009, and we started having serious conversations about what we were seeing in society. Young men and women standing on the side of the road with signs in their hands. And that's what led us to found the Veterans Leadership Council, which eventually has now turned into the Veterans Life Center, which is, I believe, is accepting its first residents this month, actually. COVID set them back a bit. But that was an
Congratulations.
Thank you so very much. It was a lot of folks worked really hard on that. I was just fortunate to be presented with the right thing to do at a time in my life when I was looking for that and had some skills to apply to the job. So I was very fortunate there. A lot of things I learned in the Marine Corps came in very handy there. That led me to go to work for the Department of what is now Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, which I was honored to be able to help found in 2015. They're celebrating the 5th anniversary of the founding tomorrow over at DMVA, and that's what brought me to the Division of Mental Health, and it has made veteran suicide prevention a prime focus of my life, and trying to stop this shame, which is exactly what it is, that we can't find better ways to connect with men and women who have served us so faithfully. Here in North Carolina, we did some calculations and some numbers, and we believe that that equates to 5 to 6 a week. Glenn, sir?
Oh, okay. Semper Fi, Marine.
Hoorah.
Peg, we had to get that in.
I support that.
Well, I came to it because, as you read in my bio, unfortunately, suicide has been with me for a long time. I was not too far out of NAMI when, and I was staying with my grandparents, and my grandfather took his life in the next room. And then from there, after I got out my first time and was in school and then started my journalism career, unfortunately, as a police reporter, I had to write about quite a few suicides or attempts. And then, of course, a lot of homicides as well. So, that whole scenario kind of stayed with me. And then once I retired from journalism, Mental Health America in Charlotte, one of their directors latched on to me and said, you need to take these courses. And so I started taking all the QPR and mental health first aid and a bunch of the courses, and just started teaching the classes for Mental Health America, for Atrium Health, working with Veterans Bridge Home, which is a big agency in Charlotte, and a lot of individual vets that I know where I'm offering support. So it's just something that's, the topic's been with me forever, for a long time, but just I decided, like Jeff did, to work with my brothers and sisters in uniform.
Well, I'm so glad that both of you did. I know for a lot of us who work in helping areas, it is a way of giving back. It's also a way of filling our own cups. And I truly appreciate the difference both of you are making. I also want to acknowledge with the veteran suicide statistic, there are different ways of how they define veteran, whether they include reservists. So I've heard different numbers along those lines. I took the number I've heard most often that I found in a VA report. So I just want to put it out there. I know there are different ways of framing that. So my next question goes to Glenn, and Jeff, I'd love to hear any follow-up that you'd like to share. Veterans are 1.5 times more likely than civilians to complete suicide. The first reason that comes to mind for a lot of us is folks who've been deployed, they experience some trauma, they get post-traumatic stress. Are there other factors that we should be aware of?
Well, yes. I mean, unfortunately for some of our women veterans, they've been sexually assaulted. There have been situations during deployment and as well as stateside, but also just, some younger active duty folks that are just stressed out from the experience. I've been reading a lot of stats about the Air Force, and the Air Force numbers are up dramatically. And, and in some of the numbers, they're talking about, all of these, a few of these folks have never been deployed. They've been stateside. So yes, deployment is a big one. But it's also just veterans overall. As an older vet, I talk to a lot of my Vietnam colleagues, and they're older and they just feel lonely and lost, and they feel that that's the only way out, or they're homeless, or they went through a bad breakup or lost a job, or the myriad of reasons that we that do the training understand. So yes, deployment's a big one, but there are a myriad of other factors.
Okay. Thank you. Jeff, do you have anything you'd like to add?
Well, I just magnify what Glenn has said. We've got not only MST, TBI is a big factor.
Yep.
And that stands for traumatic brain injury.
Traumatic brain injury, yes, ma'am. So that is all of these things, these SMI, SPMI type conditions play some factor. I believe there are others as well. Many, other components and social determinants of health outcomes. Certainly, there's no one specific cause. Frequently, what we see in both transitioning vets that are getting out of the military after some period of time in that 14 to 18 month period are the same thing that we see with older veterans as well, right? It's loss of tribe and loss of mission. Or in older vets, they've lost their spouse and they don't feel they have a purpose. So those are some of the commonalities that we try to find ways to reach and get past.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you raise a lot of good points. There's traumatic brain injury. There is serious and persistent mental illness, life changes. There are many factors that go into these numbers and these tragedies. And I know one of the things that impacts the way the statistics are measured are certain groups are more prone to suicide, certain age groups, men who, although they attempt suicide less frequently, are more likely to kill themselves in the end. So I know those were some of the things that might have skewed the number of suicides as well among veterans. A lot of ways to measure things, but either way, we've got our work cut out for us for sure. So Jeff, between 2005 and 2017, the general suicide rate in the United States increased, including that of veterans, according to the VA again. What's being done to prevent these deaths today?
Well, on the state level, we're seeing unprecedented coordination between VA and state agencies. We've had tremendous success here in North Carolina with our governor's working group on veteran service members and their families, which was founded jointly by DHHS and VA staff over 15 years ago when these wars had just started, and to try and better coordinate and collaborate on responses. And we're seeing the fruits of that hard work. I shudder to think what the rates would be if we weren't doing the things we've been doing through there. One of the things that we're very proud of for the last 6 years, and I believe the new ones are coming out, being announced tomorrow, is our North Carolina Veterans Resource Guide that DMVA puts out. 200 pages of help, not only for, and you mentioned this earlier, folks question their veteran status. Certainly the VA's definition of veteran, and depending on which half of the VA you're dealing with, is complicated. But there's not only plenty of veterans resources in the resource guide, there's also DHHS resources for every North Carolinian. Find someone who can help you, and they'll help explain it to you. The book is full of all sorts of those folks. So that's one of the areas we've been very successful. The governor's working group that this comes out of has 6 partners at the head table, but we represent 6 federal, 12 state, 100 county, and over 4,000 veterans nonprofits. And our monthly meetings are the 4th Thursday of each month. You can find those at ncgwg.org. Those are also the focal points for our subcommittees. Most important to this conversation is our North Carolina Governor's Challenge to Prevent Veteran Suicide. So we have a statewide steering committee that works, and we're building on the work from the Mayor's Challenge that was pioneered in Charlotte 2 years ago. We've got an Operation Home that is centered out of the Governor's Working Group also, that helps to coordinate housing policy. We also have the helpncvets.org site, which is additional references and resources, not only for vets, but for providers and folks that work with them. In our 6th year of NC Strive, which is student veteran resources, promoting good mental health tools, not only for student veterans, but educators across the state. And we do that in full partnership with the UNC system and the community college system and the private universities and colleges here in North Carolina. So those are some of the things we've been working on.
Well, it sounds like you have a full plate. I know.
And thank you, Jeff, because I've used pretty much all of those. You know, I have my guide right here on my desk.
Thank you, sir.
I know, Jeff, I attended a mental health block grant planning council meeting, and you presented in August, and you talked about the incredible reach that some of your communications have. I'm trying to recall exactly what it was, but there was a map with circles, and it showed the prevalence of your outreach, or the penetration rather. So I know that you're really getting the word out. Yeah, there's some exciting stuff going on.
Thank you very much. We have had great luck with our communications, our partners at the Governor's Institute on Substance Abuse, because once again, we've mentioned this tonight, right? Substance abuse is frequently an issue in these situations, and certainly exacerbates access to lethal means and lowered inhibitions. So they're a natural partner for this work, and they're just very good at their job. I was watching previous to this our LME-MCO town hall that Assistant Secretary Kinsley did in partnership with UNCTV. That's another one of the avenues we've been able to use to get the word out about veterans' mental health. The first special we did with them was 2.5 years ago at the conclusion of Ken Burns' Vietnam series on PBS. We did an hour-long special on veterans' mental health, very specifically for these reasons.
Glenn, did you have anything to add before we switch to the next question?
No, that's good. That was a good wrap up.
Very good. All righty. So if I know someone, Glenn, who's in the military veteran community, who's struggling, they're telling me they don't see the point in living anymore, what should I say to them? How can I help?
Well, first of all, you want to determine where they are. Are they with you personally? Are they on the phone? Are they emailing you? First, assess the situation and find out if they're safe. Even if you're in their apartment or their house or in their car, you know, would they have a weapon or access to some kind of weapon? First, you totally assess the situation, and you know, and then from there you start asking questions. You know, when did you start feeling this way? You know, is there something that triggered the way you're feeling? You know, you just start asking those personal questions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think so many times we hesitate because it's been a taboo subject. We don't want people to be offended. But if I'm struggling and everyone's afraid of the subject, I'm going to be relieved. It's good to know that you care, and I'm going to want to unload and get some assistance many times.
Well, I mean, you know, and Jeff knows this, in both mental health first aid and with QPR suicide prevention, you know, we're tasked with asking the difficult questions. Are you thinking about killing yourself? Are you thinking about taking your life? Are you thinking about hurting yourself? I mean, we have to ask, the absolute direct questions.
Mhm. Absolutely. Jeff, any follow-up?
No. I mean, Gary's absolutely right, or Glenn's absolutely right. You have to ask the question directly. You can tell when folks are out of sorts.
Yep.
They're not answering the phone, and you wind up calling them 2 or 3 times a day. I can speak from all my own personal experiences in dealing with depression and things like that. That it was friends just stopping by because they hadn't heard from me in a couple of days. Just to see what I was doing. Those are the things, that the personal touches that make all the difference, especially for folks who have been in an inpatient situation. It's absolutely critical.
That's an
And for
excellent point.
right now, during this triple crisis, as we call it, with the pandemic and the racial protest and the economic distress on a lot of families, and of course a lot of veterans, the kind of level has amped up, and so it behooves all of us that are working with vets and our trainers, but also just other vets in general that want to help. It behooves us to as Jeff just said, ask the questions, check on your friends, buddies, colleagues, all the time, because the pressure of anxiety, depression has amped up greatly.
Mm-hmm.
And there's some things going on, if I may, that are Glenn, we talked about this. I know if you're working with Veterans Bridge Home, you certainly are acquainted with their work in NC Serves.
Yep. Well, me and Nicole are very close.
So our 4 NC Serves networks across the state of North Carolina link veterans every day with multiple resources. I think the average engagement is 2.5 referrals per vet and family members, because it's not just what leads to mental health crises. The first triggers are things like our financial pressures, almost always.
Yep.
And so how do we start relieving those pressures? And it's not always what you might think. Maybe it's not somebody reaching for a handout. What they really need is for their spouse to get their certifications transferred from another state so that they can get this great job that's on the job board, and they don't know how to do it because they just moved here, or many of the challenges are not as obvious as they would make it seem on television, but are much simpler to solve if you can get plugged into the right folks.
Mm-hmm. Right. This is a good time for me to give a shout out to the NAMI helpline. We are open from 8:30 to 5 Monday through Friday, and our chat box guru Gary Kreitz, our executive director, will type that in shortly. We're an excellent resource for helping folks navigate the system, because sometimes you just need to make that right connection, but there are many choices located in many different areas, and it's hard to go through all those. And so we need help. We need help getting focused and getting connected with the right folks.
Skilled navigators.
Well said. That was very succinct.
Yes.
Right. So moving right along, since plenty of active military and veterans are struggling right now, this is to Jeff, what would you say to them if you could, and what message do you think they need to hear?
Well, I would say to them that certainly in a time when everyone is struggling, their experiences and strength are something that all of us are counting on. And personally, certainly my military experience, I've been leaning on that more heavily than usual during this time. But that also that North Carolina is an extraordinarily fortunate place to live for veterans in particular. If you look at the number of vets, it's about 1 in 10 folks in North Carolina has or is currently wearing the uniform. And when you add in plus ones, that means about a third of the folks that turn out to vote every year are in that crowd. And as such, you know, I mentioned 4,000 veterans nonprofits in the state of North Carolina. That's an immense amount of folks engaged in helping. And there are so many networks out there. Like I said, the NC Serves networks. We've got not one, but soon to open the second Stephen A. Cohen Clinic for military families. So we've got one in Jacksonville and Fayetteville. There's nonprofits across the board. As I said, state and federal government have never worked more effectively or more closely together to address the whole spectrum of health issues affecting North Carolina veterans, and that's something we can certainly be encouraged by. So I ask that if they're having a hard time, to reach out. You can find the resource guide at the Governor's Working Group site. You can find the resource guide at DMVA's website. It's easy to come by, and you can also just Google ncserves.org. That'll take you to one of your local coordination centers. They will find the right person to help.
Good resources. I'll also go ahead and plug the NAMI Homefront program. That's a 6-session course. And this is for the loved ones of the folks with the mental health challenges. With Homefront, we're focused on veteran and military families. There's an emphasis on post-traumatic stress, coping within the military culture, which is different, a different kind of stigma, probably a more powerful stigma. And it's a fabulous resource. You can contact us at the helpline or go to NAMI.org. The class is available online. That is the most, that'll be the quickest way to get access to it. But it's a wonderful resource to help people learn about mental health challenges, learn how to be a better supporter, how to de-escalate situations and rather than ramp them up, and how to cope yourself. Would you like to add anything, Glenn?
Well, yeah, that's interesting because I'm part of a art gallery, a large art gallery in Charlotte called the Charlotte Art League, and it's led by a guy who has TBI. He was a United Nations EOD bomb technician guy, and we've started a number of arts programs for veterans. I have a specific writing program, and he teaches art and sculpture to vets. And we're expanding that. In fact, we're going to announce a couple new plans at an open house next Saturday. And we've gotten veterans from South Carolina, and even a couple people have driven from Asheville to come to those events. So I applaud the agencies that Jeff's talking about, but there are some other kind of off the grid nonprofits that are also pushing, to help veterans as much as possible under kind of a art as healing banner, because we want people to get it out, through art and writing.
I think that's fabulous. And some of those creative endeavors are especially attractive to folks who aren't comfortable in a clinical environment. That's a great way to reach people. And one of our goals with Thursdays with NAMI is to find these grassroots opportunities and help people learn about them, because they can be hidden gems.
I believe the hidden gem that we can all be proud of would be the Veterans Life Center up in Butner. It's a residential program linked in with Division of State-Owned Hospital Facilities up there and the VA to provide residential center for at-risk veterans to put their lives back together again. And the folks that are running it are the finest people I know. As I said, it's taken a while to get it going, but it's really an unprecedented level of coordination between state and federal agencies to make that happen. And it's going to be a model for the rest of the country to follow.
Jeff, question. How
Sure.
how are folks referred?
Well, since COVID had kind of threw a monkey wrench into their opening plan, they have been, I believe, taking on a case-by-case basis, working with folks from the VA and the Cohen Clinic and the Vet Center. Certainly, if you visit their website, which I saw that Gary just had go across there, you can inquire with Martin Woodard, who is their program director, and he'll give you the straight scoop, because there's also some more coordination and things that they've worked out that don't feel comfortable speaking on, because I really don't know exactly what their plan is for how many people per day. I know that they can't open the doors and walk 50 people in on the first day.
Mm. Well, anytime we're adding housing for disadvantaged populations, you're filling a huge need. So I'm really thrilled to hear that. Housing is one of the major topics we hear about on our helpline here at NAMI North Carolina. And since COVID-19 has come into play, we hear about a third of our calls and emails have to do with COVID-19, the stress, the perhaps lack of privacy, the financial pressure. So yeah, that's a wonderful resource, and it's wonderful that you help bring it to the state. Okay, then. Another question for Glenn. We live in interesting times. We've got a pandemic, social unrest, a deeply divided nation. How is it all impacting the veterans and military folks in your world?
Well, not that many active duty, but for veterans, just as we, Jeff and I both, and you spoke about, we just have to stay in touch and make sure that, any one or all three of those crises are, affecting them. Just staying close, phone, email. And if we're finding anybody that's in distress, that we're asking the questions and seeing how they're doing. I just, as you mentioned in my bio, a grief, I just took, this lengthy grief support course. And what we talked about was that everybody's grieving something, whether we admit to it or not, whether it's loss of freedom or just, loss of going to the restaurant or could be something drastic, loss of job or any of those scenarios. And it's just a matter of, we have got to stay close to each other and even closer now than we were before, and make sure that that people know that there are adequate resources out there if they need clinical help, to make sure that we refer them, in those directions.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely, Gunny, and one of the wonderful organizations that we have not yet mentioned when we've spoken about the larger VA are the vet centers, and the key role they play in linking vets with services.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah, well, that's why it's wonderful that you have the resource directory out there, because there are so many pieces to the puzzle, and it's important to have one location where they can all be found.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, so moving right along, this question is for Jeff. What can everyday folks do to support active military and veterans they know, or support the programs that we've been talking about tonight?
Well, certainly I would begin by asking them to consider simply asking the question of folks that they work with, if they'd ever served in the military. Certainly in any kind of medical or clinical situation, that is a really important question to know how to ask and what to ask. Psych Armor has some wonderful free online trainings about things of that nature. That would be the very first thing. And then the second thing I would say would be go back to getting them a resource guide, so I can get the 10,000 that I'm getting shipped Monday out of my office.
That's a great goal. Would you like to add anything, Glenn?
No, that was good.
Yes, it was. And I see, thank you, Gary, for explaining Gunny is gunnery sergeant. That went right over my head, so I appreciate
Yes,
that.
that's correct.
All right. So this is a question I always ask because there's so much going on, and those of us who are in outreach, who are helping or running the programs, we need to do self-care as well. So how are you taking care of yourselves these days?
Well, for me, I'm a writer, and I do a lot of writing, both, heavy stuff, like, suicide or mental health, but I also do a lot of what we call fluffy writing and love and flowers kind of stuff. So it just depends on what frame of mind I'm in, on any particular day. But also, of course, walking the dog and talking to good friends and, playing, one thing I tell a lot of folks, folks I work with is play music. Play music, play music, play music. And, whatever your genre is, just, go sit on the back porch and play music for a couple hours, because whatever your level of anxiety, that will bring you down. And but yeah, that's one thing we talk about, at both, Atrium and at Mental Health America is self-care, 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 self-care as much as possible. And so, because if we're not taking care of ourselves, we can't take care of anybody else.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
I would absolutely agree with everything Glenn said. I have been making myself take a break from endless Zooms and calls and take a walk every afternoon, a nice vigorous one without talking to anybody. I've been trying to do that. And certainly staying connected with friends and family has been very, very important in making sure that my mental health is in the right place, and also every once in a while a little fishing on the side.
Yeah. I love all of those. Personally, I love getting out with my dog. I love the music. Haven't fished in a while, but that's something that I got to get on my list. That sounds like a great thing to do. So last question here. What gives you hope?
The fact that so many vets, but also so many others are working, for us to lessen the burden of suicide or suicide attempts or ideations. That gives me hope. I know, on my end, we are doing a lot of training, teaching gatekeeper courses to a lot of regular folks, but also to vets. And, and all of us know the more folks that are trained, in both mental health first aid, RAP, our peer support specialists all across the board, that's going to help, lessen the burden of mental illness for vets, but also, lessen the burden of suicide. Mm-hmm. So, the more the merrier.
Mm-hmm.
What gives me hope is the progress that we continue to make, even in the face of natural disasters and pandemics. That the folks who care about veterans and servicemen and women in North Carolina continue to step forward and step up and help us in wonderful and unusual ways to make a difference in every sector of society, and usually and wonderfully for the rest of our work, help provide new solutions which make better places for everyone.
Mhm. I agree. I find that if I read the headlines and focus on the news, I'll feel pretty demoralized. But if I focus on the grassroots initiatives, the people around me, all the good things happening, it's a much different perspective, and it's a good one. So this is about the time we're going to wrap up the interview portion of our show. And I love the themes that you gentlemen have come up with, that let's show each other that we care. Let's keep communication open about mental health in particular. It's not always an easy thing to discuss, but once we get in the habit, we realize how essential and how so many people need to be having these conversations. Mental health is part of physical health, and we all have to take care of ourselves. So with that, we're going to move on to our video of the week. First, I'll give a big shout out to our behind the scenes helpers, our fabulous tech intern, Eddie Simmons, who's with us every week, and Executive Director Gary Kreitz, who's on the chat box. Thank you both for spending your time with us tonight. And of course, thanks to our guests. Our video this week features former U.S. Marine. I've got a real Marine theme going tonight. It wasn't intentional, but it's a beautiful thing. This is former U.S. Marine Sean Caldwell of Huntersville. He serves on the board of NAMI Lake Norman Iredell. He's also the chair of our veteran committee of the NAMI North Carolina board. I want to say our prior chair, Johnny Puckett, is with us tonight. So I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart, Johnny, for all that you've done. You've been a fantastic contributor, and I know you've had a lot on your plate lately, and we're all sending our love. So with that, let's have a look at this video, which I think to you, Jeff, will look familiar.
I've had friends that have tried to commit suicide. They weren't successful, and thank God for that. And this is more than one person, and they were veterans. So a lot of my buddies blown up. So with that thought in mind, for a long time, I didn't get the help that I needed, and I suffered for it. And sometimes I look back and I understand now why I suffered, because I gave up. So if I can say anything, you can't give up. You got to press on. You got to give yourself an opportunity, and you don't want to just feel better. If I can tell any of us, we got to live better. Right. Hey. Right. Hey. Right. Hey.
Okay, let me put a stop to that. Very good. So now it's time for questions from our virtual studio audience. And thank you, Sean Caldwell. You did a fabulous job in that video. Jeff, did that look familiar to you?
It really did. That was something we got to work with a former ABC 11 reporter that does some work for us, John Camp. And so we recorded 5 or 6 of those. They are available at the helpncvets.org site that is on the Governor's Working Group page.
That's right. I found it on the Facebook page of the Governor's Institute. So you can also find it on Facebook if you're a Facebook person. But wonderful video. I loved it. All right. So to ask a question, virtual studio audience members, you want to check out the small icon that says Q&A near the bottom of your screen. Type in your question and it will magically be delivered to us. We've got until 8:30. Sometimes we go 60 minutes, sometimes the full 90, whatever the group needs and desires works for us. So I've got, this is quite a question. It's a little bit of a story. I was medically retired from the Marine Corps, another Marine in 2008. Until recently, I had never heard of the DMVA. I have tried to contact them via the numbers on the website for Raleigh, as well as my local number. I have spoken to a young lady once who said I was assigned someone to work with me and they would be in touch. However, That was 2 weeks ago, and I have since left numerous messages and have not received a call back. As a certified peer support specialist, I work with many veterans and would like to point them in the direction of the DMVA as a state resource. But if I can't get a hold of them, what should I do? Can you give me guidance on contacting them successfully so I can pass the word on to other veterans?
Well, certainly their website, milvets.nc.gov, has the contact information there. I don't work for the DMVA, so I really can't speak for the specifics of, I know that they have been dealing with COVID and working remotely in many of their service centers to stop the spread, because they really had to clamp things down, especially with the veterans nursing homes. But almost every county in North Carolina also has county service officers that are fully trained and accredited to help veterans navigate the claims and appeals process. And as Glenn will tell you, the folks in Charlotte are absolutely top notch. Dougie Johnson.
I concur.
Dougie Johnson, another Marine, runs things here in Wake County, and his folks do an awesome job. So in the Veterans Resource Guide, there is the list of every single county office in the state. If you can't catch somebody from a state office, because they also have training obligations to train counties, a half a dozen counties in their area, and keep them up to speed on the ever-changing world of veterans resources. Your county officers are a wonderful, wonderful option.
All right. Glenn, would you like to add anything?
Well, that's good. That's Jeff's bailiwick.
Right. All right. Virtual studio audience, I'm counting on you to ask some questions here. We've got two amazing resources tonight. Thank you both for your service to our country. Do you have any suggestions for communicating with vets who are not in an apparent crisis, but are reluctant to open up and talk about how they are doing? How can we as civilians reach out in ways that honor their boundaries? Good question.
That's very good. Again, I do a writing program, and it's amazing. I started it at CPCC, Central Piedmont Community College, probably 5, 6, 7 years ago. And I had both, vets, active duty, and civilians in the class. And it was amazing, how much they finally let it out, through writing. So, for me, that is one of the ways to break the log jam, is being able to write it down and being very transparent about your experience.
I would go back to Psych Armor, and there's some of their free trainings, 15 things vets want you to know. Might be a good place for folks who are feeling anxious about how to reach out.
Really good suggestions. All right, thank you for that question. Good answers. I wonder if it would be helpful along the lines of your comments, Glenn, to write to the veteran in my life instead of speaking to them face to face, and just say, I want you to know you have my support. Sometimes it's easier to communicate this way about sensitive topics. Please feel free to write to me.
No, that's good. That's very good. I mean, I like that. Any way that we can, through, well, at least for me, since, creativity is a big thing for me, any way that we can break the log jam through creativity, that's a good thing.
Yeah, I know my own father was he was in the Army during the Korean War, and he never, ever talked about it. Is there a way to break the ice when you can tell someone is upset, but they never have talked about it?
Well, with family members, at least, and Jeff can probably speak more than this from a clinical standpoint. Um, it's often a third party person or another veteran that they'll talk to, but family members, and I've been hearing this and preaching this for decades that, I'll talk about NAM, but my kids or my wife still don't know,
Mm,
but, I can talk to, my buddies that, as you mentioned, I'm one of those that go from absolute lived experience. And so you're more apt to get that third party person than you are a family member.
mhm,
At least that's my contention.
Well, you're absolutely right. I would absolutely agree with you, sir. And please, the closest I get to being a clinician is they don't lock the doors behind me when I go visit them. But one of the things and I'm going to go back to the things that give me hope. It's a wonderful grassroots effort that started in the central Piedmont area and is quite active in Glenn's neighborhood. The Veterans Coffees that one of your fellow Vietnam vets founded working with hospice, and they're sponsored by Krispy Kreme and Biscuitville. Now, I think COVID has kind of put a stop to them for right now. They were tremendously effective, low pressure, outreach, and just some of the most amazing events I've ever been to.
mm. I've heard wonderful things about that from our NAMI South Mountains area. They cover Forest City, cluster of counties out that way. Yeah, I think those heart-to-hearts in a safe space, they are powerful.
Yeah, there's a place in Mooresville called Richards, and I don't know if you two know about it, but it's kind of a museum, but it's also just a place where, and a lot of the younger vets, but mostly the older vets, and it's a coffee shop. It's called Richards Coffee Shop, but it's really a veterans museum, and it's in Mooresville. I mean, it's look it up. I mean, it's relatively famous because, they will invite, some generals in to talk and some other, some Medal of Honor winners in to talk. And it's just a great, great safe space. And civilians can go and that, and they invite a lot of younger kids there. So the kids really understand what, the non-vets or even the, Desert Storm, Desert Shield, and then of course leading up to Iraq and Afghanistan, vets have went through. And even some of the older ones that are still alive, World War II and Korea.
Right. We ready for the next question? Anything to add to that? All right, I don't want to rush y'all. There's a lot of good stuff here. Since there's such a shortage in veteran resources due to COVID-19, are there providers outsourcing for peer support specialists?
That's interesting. Being a peer support specialist, I kind of work independently, although I kind of, because Mental Health America really doesn't have a peer support operation, at least the chapter, that covers Charlotte and Catawba County. So I kind of, work my skills as a peer support specialist, into mental health first aid and suicide prevention. So it's kind of a conglomeration of those, but that's a very good question. I can't answer that.
Peg, I would say that resources have been sorted around and reshuffled. I think people's needs have changed. And to, absolutely to the caller's point, there is a lot of need out there. We're finding need in different areas, but we've been very encouraged. The VA, I don't think they've missed a single mental health appointment for lack of having someone on the other end of a Zoom or telemedicine call since COVID started. Likewise, our friends at the Cohen Veterans Network have gone totally virtually and have been able to maintain connection with patients statewide now, instead of just being previously in the Fayetteville area. And likewise, the one in Jacksonville will come on and backstop some of that operation. I know that our Hope for NC hotline and Hope for Healers numbers through the Division of Mental Health and DHHS have been staying very busy. So there's a lot of resources are shifting. I would urge people to check with Emergency Management's website, and those links are on DHHS at the COVID-19 banner across probably the top of every state website, actually, to get connected with them in some fashion. But I don't want people to think that there aren't resources out there for folks, or the appropriate measures are not being taken as rapidly as possible.
That's a really good point. This is a very fluid time. Things are changing. The state seems to be really nimble as far as responding to changing circumstances. I see a lot of concern and a lot of outreach, a lot of communication. So that's comforting to me. And it's important to always check in with those websites and see what's happening today. I'm looking at questions in the chat box. If you're able to type into the Q&A, that really helps me. Your question can get lost in the chat box because it scrolls away. But this one is, our topic has been suicide among vets, which have a high level of substance abuse or substance use disorders. Is that a related phenomenon, substance use and suicide?
Yes, as one who has that lived experience, yes, it is. It is. And, I think, I was looking at, some of the stats, earlier today and yesterday, and, especially alcohol abuse is, is very high, on the totem pole in terms of causing vets to have attempts or ideations, or unfortunately the act itself.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Did you want to add?
No, I mean, it's people are self-medicating, and that leads to lowered inhibitions and bad decision making. And that's something that I believe Secretary Cohen mentioned it tonight or this afternoon on her briefing. I mean, it's from the top down. We are aware and working as diligently as we can. Certainly the first of the town halls with the LME and MCO system is on this evening as well. We've been pushing that message throughout the entire series of suicide prevention town halls in the last 2 months that we've been doing with DMH. And likewise, we will certainly be focusing entirely on that subject through the Governor's Working Group this month, which is next Thursday from 2 to 4 at ncgwg.org. And we spoke earlier about the necessity of staying in touch. One of the interesting programs that we're going to hear from are the folks at Stop Soldier Suicide and their intensive peer follow-up program for people at high risk. They've really been doing some amazing modeling, and we're looking forward to seeing how they're going to help us solve another piece of this puzzle.
Okay, I didn't quite get the last sentence. You lowered your voice just enough that I think it faded away.
I apologize. We're interested to see how they're going to help us solve this particular piece of the puzzle, because that is one of the linkages that we've been trying to make. It's how to get peers linked up with folks most at risk. And they've been working very hard to come up with something.
All righty. I'm seeing too, we've got not only our Executive Director, Gary Kreitz, on the chat box, but we've got Susan Robinson from the Department of Health and Human Services. So thank you for that, sharing your expertise with us tonight, Susan. That's a wonderful
My guardian angel.
We all need one. I do. Okay, next question. Do we know if there are any plans to increase the number of veteran treatment courts? Currently, there are only 4. Veterans need veterans dealing with the criminal justice system. Good question.
Jeff, that's all you.
I believe that Wake County is undergoing some efforts. I know Mecklenburg County has tried and had a few different variations they're working on, but they really are locally driven efforts. However, I know also that the Harnett Veterans Treatment Court sees veterans from outside of Harnett County. I believe they're a district treatment court as well, so they can make arrangements with other courts for nonviolent offenses. We certainly would like to see more of them.
All right. Yeah, those are extremely effective. For those who aren't familiar with veteran courts, drug courts, mental health courts, they work with folks to set treatment goals, recovery goals, and they check in with the court, the defendant does. If they meet all the goals and are able to check all the boxes, they may have their conviction expunged. It can also lead to alternative options to incarceration. So it's a wonderful thing for folks who have an illness that led to their arrest.
And there's a wonderful video we watched last month at the Governor's Working Group. If you go to the archive section and watch last month's program, John Camp did video, and it's about 18 minutes long. Did a really great job interviewing and speaking with each of the 4 courts in North Carolina.
All right. And another question, are there any legal services in North Carolina specifically for veterans to assist them with legal matters? That's a tough one.
There's a veterans law clinic at UNC that is working with NC Central's School of Law, and Wake Forest University School of Law also has a clinic. They largely help vets with VA-related claims issues, things that are keeping vets from getting the benefits. For vets who are in other sorts of legal problems, domestic disputes frequently come up. That's more of a legal aid. They would be the better people to call there.
Okay. Thank you. This is about the Governor's Working Group. Jeff, is the Governor's Working Group meeting virtually next week?
It is meeting virtually every month until we're out of this.
Yeah, we do live in interesting times.
Well, emergency management will give their space back.
So, all right, we've got a lot of questions coming now. Will these resources be posted for future referencing? I suppose that one's really to NAMI NC. We'll be happy to do that.
Please go to the ncgwg.org. Everything I've spoken about, there's a link to.
All right, very good. And so the next question is actually a website, justiceforvets.org. I'm not sure what the question is in that, but thank you for sharing it. Justiceforvets spelled out.org. All right. Any other questions, concerns, or good jokes for our esteemed guests? All righty, that was a long pause. Thank you for making this time. Well, that's not a question, but it's certainly a welcome comment. I want to thank our guests so much for sharing your experience and insight and your personal stories with us tonight. An extremely important topic, veteran suicide, and we're so glad to have you here. Thank you for your service and for your time again this evening. Another 90 minutes has flown by. We've got a great show for you lined up next week. Did you know that Chinese Americans are the oldest and largest group of Asian ancestry in the United States? What kind of pressure comes with that, especially in light of the model minority stereotype? Lily Chen will be here with us to answer those and other questions about mental health in the Chinese American community. As we go ahead forward this week, I want to thank everyone for all that you do to contribute to positive mental health conversations in your community. Whatever you do this week, be sure to go where you need to go, do what you need to do to be safe. Have a wonderful week. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks so very much. And Glenn, it was wonderful to meet you, Gunny.
Yes, yes, Jeff, thank you. General Wilson is my neighbor, by the way.
Please give him my fondest hellos. I miss him greatly.
I will do that. I will do that. Peg, thank you very much. Thanks, NAMI.
All righty. Have a great week, everyone.
Thank you,
Very
Peg.
good. Semper Fi.
Hoorah.